The North does not whisper its legends. It hammers them into stone, into memory, into blood. This is a land where the sea decides who lives, where winter strips away weakness, and where the gods are said to walk just beyond the edge of sight. From this unforgiving world rose a name that would echo across centuries, carried by firelight and fear alike. Ragnar Lodbrok was not born into comfort. He was born into destiny, and destiny in the North always demands a price. Before we kick things off, give that like button a little love and hit subscribe if this is the kind of content you enjoy and want to join in for more of these deep dives. While you get settled, I'd love to hear where you're watching from and what hour it is. It's kind of amazing to see how far this little corner reaches. Now relax, maybe dim the lights, let the room get quiet, and let's slowly wander into today's story together. The world of the Vikings was shaped by ice and iron. Long winters hardened the people, short summers forced them to act quickly, and the sea served as both road and grave. Survival required strength, but respect required honor. Above all, life was ruled by fate. The Norse believed every soul was bound by invisible threads spun by the Norns, unseen forces who decided when glory would rise and when death would fall. The gods were not distant creators. They were flawed, fierce, and ever watching. Odin, the All-Father, traded an eye for wisdom and hung himself upon the world tree for knowledge. Thor crushed giants with thunder. Loki twisted truth into chaos. To live in the North was to believe that courage might earn you Valhalla, while cowardice doomed you to obscurity. This was the soil from which Ragnar would grow. The origins of Ragnar Lodbrok blur the line between history and myth. Some sagas call him the son of a king. Others claim his bloodline reaches back to the gods themselves. What remains constant is uncertainty. Ragnar's birth was never simple, never ordinary. Stories speak of omens at his arrival, storms breaking without warning, ravens circling where none had flown before. Even his name carries weight. Lodbrok, meaning shaggy breeches, would one day become legend, but in his youth it meant nothing. Ragnar was born into a world where names were earned, not gifted. He was not crowned at birth, he was tested. As a boy, Ragnar was restless. While others learned to farm and fish, he watched the horizon. Elders noted his silence, the way his eyes lingered on the sea long after lessons ended. He listened more than he spoke, absorbing stories of ancient heroes, fallen kings, and gods who rewarded boldness. Ragnar learned quickly, too quickly. He fought harder than boys twice his size and refused to yield even when bloodied. But it was not rage that marked him. It was control. He waited. He observed. When he struck, it was decisive. Some called him stubborn. Others whispered that the gods had placed a spark in him that could not be extinguished. Ragnar's first true test came not from battle, but from necessity. When a local chieftain demanded tribute that threatened to starve surrounding villages, Ragnar saw more than injustice. He saw weakness disguised as authority. Instead of challenging the man directly, Ragnar gathered allies quietly. He studied patrol routes. He learned who among the chieftain's men were loyal and who were afraid. When the confrontation came, it was swift. Ragnar used the terrain, drawing his enemy into marshland where numbers meant nothing. The chieftain fell not because Ragnar was stronger, but because he was smarter. Word spread quickly. Strength earns notice. Cunning earns respect. As Ragnar grew, so did his reputation, and reputation invites enemies. Local kings viewed him as a threat, a young wolf roaming too close to established power. Challenges followed. Some were formal duels, others came as ambushes in the dark. Ragnar survived them all.
Each victory added to his legend. He fought with ferocity, but ruled with restraint. He rewarded loyalty and crushed betrayal without hesitation. Rivals learned that underestimating Ragnar was fatal. He was not reckless, he was patient, and patience in the north is often deadlier than steel. Yet for all his victories, Ragnar remained unsettled. Power alone did not satisfy him. He began to speak of destiny, of a path laid out beyond local rule and petty feuds. Seers took notice. One is said to have warned him that greatness would come, but never peace, that his name would be remembered, but his life would be marked by loss. Ragnar listened. He did not turn away. In the north, fate is not something you flee, it is something you meet head-on, weapon in hand. Ragnar's ambitions stretched beyond his homeland, beyond known shores. The sea called to him, and with it, the promise of glory and ruin. This was only the beginning. The boy, shaped by storms, was becoming something more. A leader, a challenger of kings, a man walking willingly towards legend, fully aware that fire both forges and consumes.
Fear has a sound in the north. It howls through pine forests at dusk and coils through villages like smoke. In those days, that sound had a name, the Lindworm, a shadow with scales, a hunger without end. It slept beneath the earth and woke only to ruin, and wherever it crawled, silence followed. Crops failed, livestock vanished. Warriors who sought glory returned as stories, if they returned at all. This was not a beast men boasted about. This was a terror they prayed would never notice them. The Lindworm haunted the edges of the known world, a massive serpent said to encircle hills and crush trees beneath its coils. It demanded offerings, and when those offerings failed, it took lives instead. Villages near its lair emptied. Kings sent fighters. None came back. Mothers barred doors at night. Fires burned low. The monster became more than flesh. It became a test from the gods. It was said that whoever slew the Lindworm would earn more than gold. They would earn a name that could not be erased. And names in the north were worth more than crowns. Ragnar heard these stories and did not look away. Ragnar understood something others did not. Strength alone would not defeat the serpent. He studied the tales carefully, listening for patterns hidden beneath fear. The Lindworm crushed enemies with its coils. Its scales turned blades aside. Fire and venom were whispered in the same breath as its name. So Ragnar prepared, not like a reckless youth, but like a hunter. He crafted garments soaked in tar and resin, layered thick against fang and scale. Over this he wore rough wool and hardened leather, a strange armor that looked almost foolish until tested. These shaggy garments would later give him a name that would echo across the north. He sharpened his spear. He tested his shield. He memorized the terrain around the serpent's lair. When Ragnar set out, he did not do so with cheers behind him. He left quietly, as though fate itself was holding its breath. The earth trembled when the Lindworm emerged. Its body moved like a living wall, scales scraping stone, eyes ancient and unblinking. The air thickened. Ragnar did not charge, he waited. When the serpent struck, Ragnar rolled aside, feeling the wind of death pass where he had stood.
The beast wrapped itself around him, tightening with crushing force. Ragnar's armor held. The tarred layers resisted fang and venom long enough for him to act. He drove his spear between overlapping scales, again and again, each strike precise, each breath measured. The serpent screamed, a sound like splitting earth, and thrashed wildly. Ragnar was thrown aside, battered and bloodied, but alive. With one final effort, he plunged his blade deep, piercing the heart beneath ancient armor. The Lindworm collapsed, its coils slackening, its terror silenced. The land was quiet again. Ragnar emerged from the serpent's lair changed, not unscarred, but unbroken. Word spread faster than fire in dry grass. The beast that kings could not slay had fallen to one man. Songs followed, stories grew. The strange armor he wore became legend, and with it, a name. Ragnar Lodbrok. No longer just a warrior, now a slayer of monsters. Chiefs offered feasts, kings offered alliances. Wherever Ragnar walked, eyes followed. Fear shifted direction. The North had found a new measure of courage, and it wore shaggy armor stained with serpent blood. But glory always attracts challenge. Among those who heard of Ragnar's victory was Lagertha, a shield maiden whose reputation rivaled any warrior's. She was said to fight like a storm and rule her lands with iron resolve. When Ragnar sought her hand, she did not greet him with softness. Instead, she tested him. Guard beasts barred her hall, and Ragnar faced them without hesitation, not with brute force, but with resolve earned through battle. Lagertha saw in him not only strength, but balance. They stood as equals, bound not by convenience, but by shared fire. Their union was not a retreat into peace. It was the forging of a war-born alliance, one that would shape Ragnar's rise and deepen his legend. After the serpent fell and Ragnar wed Lagertha, his name crossed fjords and forests. Warriors sought his banner, rivals watched carefully. Skalds carried tales of a man favored or tested by the gods themselves. Some said Odin had marked him, others warned that such favor never came without cost. Ragnar welcomed both views. He did not shy from destiny, he walked toward it. Yet even as fame grew, Ragnar felt the pull of something more. The serpent was slain, but the world remained vast. Lands beyond the horizon whispered of wealth, of kingdoms unprepared for the fury of the north. Ragnar listened. He had defeated a monster of myth. Next, he would challenge the world.
Power does not arrive with a trumpet call. It creeps in through victories, through loyalty earned, through fear carefully planted. By the time the North realized it, Ragnar Lodbrok no longer stood among warriors, he stood above them. His name carried weight heavier than gold, and wherever it was spoken, doors opened or defenses were raised. The Serpent-Slayer had become something far more dangerous, a leader who knew how to win. Ragnar's rise was not sealed by bloodline alone. He claimed authority through action. He led raids personally, shared spoils fairly, and punished betrayal without mercy. Warriors followed him because he stood in the shield wall, not behind it. Farmers supported him because he protected their lands. Even rival jarls had to admit that Ragnar ruled not by accident, but by design. Assemblies gathered to recognize his growing influence. Some crowned him king, others called him warlord. Ragnar cared little for titles. Power, to him, was not about thrones, it was about control of fate. And fate
he believed, favored those bold enough to seize it. The sea had always been Ragnar's ally, but now it became his weapon. He ordered ships built lighter, faster, capable of crossing waters others feared. With these vessels, Ragnar pushed beyond familiar coasts, striking where no Northman had struck before. Foreign shores fell silent at the sight of dragon-proud ships. Monasteries, trading towns, and undefended settlements learned the sound of oars in fog. Ragnar's tactics were swift and precise. He avoided prolonged conflict, striking hard and leaving before enemies could gather strength. Each successful raid sharpened his ambition. The world beyond Scandinavia was rich and unprepared. Gold changes men, so does glory. Ragnar understood both. Wealth fueled loyalty, but reputation fueled obedience. He allowed his legend to grow, knowing fear traveled faster than ships. The more distant the target, the greater the reward. But with every victory, Ragnar felt the pull of excess. He began to measure success not by survival, but by scale. Bigger raids, greater risks, richer lands. The gods had rewarded him before. Surely they would continue. This belief planted a seed, one that would soon test every oath he had sworn. As Ragnar's power expanded, so did his political reach. Marriage became more than companionship, it became strategy. Alliances were forged not only with swords, but with promises spoken over feasts and sealed with shared bloodlines. Yet alliances are fragile things. Trust fractures under ambition. Old loyalties bent under new demands. Some followed Ragnar out of admiration, others stayed out of fear. A few waited for the right moment to turn. Ragnar himself was not immune to compromise. He broke oaths when he believed destiny demanded it. Each broken promise widened the distance between the man he had been and the ruler he was becoming. Power invites resistance. Jarls who once bowed began to question Ragnar's authority. Kings beyond the sea took notice of the raids and prepared defenses. Where Ragnar once struck unnoticed, he now faced organized opposition. Battles grew larger, losses grew heavier. Ragnar adapted, but every adaptation demanded sacrifice. He crushed rival jarls to maintain control, but doing so fractured the unity he had built. Victories tasted different now, less like triumph, more like necessity. The North no longer spoke with one voice, and Ragnar, at its center, felt the strain. The empire Ragnar built rested on conquest and charisma, but both have limits. Warriors aged, rivals learned, enemies studied his tactics, and whispers began to circulate of overreach, of arrogance, of a man who challenged not just kings, but fate itself. Ragnar sensed it. The quiet moments grew heavier. Dreams turned restless. The gods who once seemed near now felt distant. He had gained more than he ever imagined, but he had also planted the seeds of his own unraveling. This was the cost of greatness. To rise high enough to touch legend is to risk a fall that echoes just as loudly.
Legends are not ended by silence. They end in echoes of steel, of regret, of names spoken long after the body is gone. For Ragnar Lodbrok, the road to greatness had been paved with victories, but every road, no matter how glorious, bends toward an end. This is where the saga darkens, not with thunder, but with the slow, heavy steps of fate closing in. Time is the one enemy no warrior can raid or outfight. Ragnar felt it in his bones before he ever admitted it aloud. His strength remained, but recovery came slower. Scars ached in the cold.
Younger warriors watched him with admiration, but also with questions. Some wondered if the great Ragnar still carried the favor of the gods. Pride answered those doubts before wisdom could. Ragnar refused to fade quietly. He would not be remembered as a king who stepped aside. He would remind the world who he was. The sagas would not end with whispers. Yet, pride is a dangerous companion. It speaks loudly when caution should speak louder. Ragnar chose his final expedition carefully, or so he believed. He set his sights on the kingdom of Northumbria, ruled by King Ella, a man with old grievances and little love for Viking raiders. Ragnar sailed with fewer warriors than before, determined to prove he needed no great army to achieve greatness. The sea turned against him. Storms scattered his ships. Oars splintered. When Ragnar finally reached shore, he was not welcomed by fear, but by waiting blades. The land had learned. Defenses stood ready. The age of surprise had ended. Ragnar fought, but numbers overwhelmed even his skill. For the first time in his life, he was not victorious. He was taken. King Ella did not see a legend when Ragnar was dragged before him. He saw an enemy who had burned his lands and humiliated his rule. This was not a moment for mercy. It was a moment for reckoning. Ragnar was mocked, displayed, stripped of the power that had once bent kings to his will. Yet even in defeat he did not beg, he did not bargain. His silence unsettled his captors more than anger ever could. Ella understood something important. Killing Ragnar quickly would be forgettable. Breaking him would be remembered. Chains do more than bind the body. They test the spirit. Ragnar was confined, watched, starved of freedom, but not of thought. In the dark, he reflected on his life, not with regret, but with clarity. He had chased fate, challenged it, and now stood face to face with its final demand. Ragnar did not curse the gods. He did not plead with them. If this was the end written for him, he would meet it standing tall, even if his feet could no longer touch the ground freely. Those who guarded him reported something strange. Ragnar laughed. Not wildly, not bitterly, calmly, as though he had already seen what waited beyond the end. Ella chose a punishment meant to erase Ragnar's pride. He ordered the Viking king thrown into a pit filled with serpents, creatures of slow suffering and relentless fear. It was meant to reduce a legend to screams. Ragnar was lowered into the pit. Fangs struck. Pain followed. Yet his voice did not break. Instead, it rose, steady, defiant. He spoke not of fear, but of sons, of warriors who would hear of his fate and answer it with fire. He welcomed death as a warrior should, not as an ending, but as a passage. If Valhalla awaited, he would enter it with words sharp enough to cut through time. Ragnar's final words were not recorded for accuracy, but for impact. That alone speaks volumes. He declared that young pigs would squeal when they learned how the old boar had suffered. It was not a threat born of desperation. It was a promise shaped by certainty. And it was fulfilled. News of Ragnar's death spread across the north like a storm tide. His sons listened. Ivar, Bjorn, Ube, and others did not mourn quietly. They gathered armies. They remembered every slight, every wound, every chain. Ragnar's body fell into silence, but his name only grew louder. Kings trembled, kingdoms burned. The great heathen army would soon march, not just for revenge, but to carve Ragnar's legacy into the world itself. In death, Ragnar Lodbrok became what he had always chased. Not just a king, not just a conqueror, a legend no pit could contain.
A man can be slain, but a legend leaves heirs. When Ragnar Lodbrok fell into the dark, the world did not grow quieter, it held its breath. Across the north, the wind carried the same question from hall to hall, from hearth to harbor. What happens when the sons of a legend hear how their father died? The news did not arrive gently. It was carried by broken men, by whispered rumors, by enemies who thought the tale would inspire fear. Instead, it ignited fury. Bjorn Ironside clenched his fists in silence. Ubbe turned his grief inward, sharpening it into resolve. Sigurd's snake in the eye stared into the fire, seeing not flames, but futures rewritten in blood and iron. And Ivar the Boneless smiled, not from joy, but from certainty. Ragnar's death was not the end of the story, it was the signal. The gods had taken their payment, and now the debt would be answered by sons who had inherited more than a name. They had inherited a destiny. Never before had such a force gathered under one purpose. Warriors came from every corner of the Norse world, jarls, kings, mercenaries, and men with nothing left to lose. They did not gather for plunder alone, they gathered for reckoning. This force would be remembered as the great heathen army, not because of its numbers alone, but because of its unity. Old rivalries were set aside, feuds were paused. Ragnar's sons stood at the center, bound by blood and vengeance. When their ships darkened the horizon, kingdoms trembled. This was not a raid, this was an invasion shaped by grief and guided by fury. Among Ragnar's sons, Ivar the Boneless stood apart. Where others wielded axes and swords, Ivar wielded the mind. His body was fragile, but his will was unbreakable. He studied enemies the way others studied terrain. He saw fear as a weapon sharper than steel. Ivar planned patiently. He turned divisions among enemies into weaknesses. He whispered promises to rivals and threats to kings. Where armies met walls, Ivar found cracks. Some feared him more than any blade. Others called him cursed. Ivar did not care. His father had died in chains, and the world would answer for it. The sons of Ragnar marched toward King Ela, the man who believed he had erased a legend. Ela fortified his lands, gathered allies, and prepared for siege. But preparation means little when facing an enemy who refuses to be predictable. The great heathen army surrounded Ela's kingdom like a closing fist. Towns fell, defenses crumbled, allies vanished. When Ela was finally captured, he stood not before one avenger, but many. The sagas differ on what followed. Some say justice was swift, others describe punishment meant to echo Ragnar's suffering. What matters is not the method, but the meaning. Ela's fall was not vengeance alone, it was a message. Kings who mistook legends for men would pay dearly for the error. After Ela's defeat, the sons of Ragnar did not retreat, they expanded. Bjorn Ironside sailed farther than any before him, carving his own legend across distant shores. Ubbe sought balance between conquest and rule. Ivar became a figure whispered about in fear, his presence felt even when unseen. Ragnar's legacy was no longer singular, it had multiplied. His name became a banner under which new kingdoms were challenged and old orders reshaped. Skalds sang not only of the father, but of the storm he had unleashed through his sons. Yet legacy is never only about conquest, it is about memory. Over time, Ragnar Lodbrok became more than a man in the stories. He became an idea, a symbol of ambition, defiance, and the cost of chasing greatness. Some tales exaggerated his feats, others softened his flaws. All of them ensured one thing: he would not be forgotten. Was Ragnar favored by the gods or punished by them? Did he shape his fate or merely fulfill it? The sagas do not agree. That uncertainty is what keeps the legend alive.
Ragnar's story reminds us that immortality is not found in avoiding death, but in leaving something behind that refuses to die. His sons carried his fire forward, but the spark was always his. And as long as stories are told beside firelight, as long as the sea calls to those bold enough to answer, the name Ragnar Lodbrok will endure, etched into myth, memory, and the endless echo of the North. If this journey through gods, warriors, and legends is the kind of story you want more of, this is the place to stay. There are countless myths still waiting in the dark, and by joining this channel, you make sure you're here when the next saga begins.